to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, March 18th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Trevor May here with you on this episode. We get you caught up on the WBC final. Venezuela brings home its first World Baseball Classic championship. Absolutely amazing championship game going down on Tuesday night. Lance Brozdowski joins us in just a few minutes. He had a big pitching development survey that he sent out. Some really interesting responses. Get some really deep dynasty sleepers in that conversation as well. So if you're trying to make some pickups or you still haven't drafted yet in your keeper dynasty league, there are some names to file away on the pitching side coming up here later on in this episode. Trevor, how's it going for you on this Wednesday?
I am doing great. I enjoyed watching the finale last night with my son. So he's starting to figure baseball out, or he's starting to figure out that I like baseball, which is cool. I can't wait to share that more with him. So yeah, I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
I always like losing the battle for the remote against my son. He's got a strong-willed mind of a 3-year-old, and I was trying to find anything I could to keep him on the game as long as possible before having to go to my phone or the iPad, before my screen got to this size. And the thing he likes right now are the numbers on the back of the jersey. So if I just call up the numbers as we see them, like, that buys me about 5 or 10 extra minutes before I lose to Miss Rachel or whatever he wants to watch.
I got to watch it during a Little League game, so yes, I had the smallest of screens.
Were you managing that Little League game, or were
At least I was not.
I was in the stands.
I told him I couldn't manage in the spring, so.
Well, the timing of our episode on Tuesday was such that we really didn't talk a lot about the matchup, but we tried to predict the headlines for today, and we didn't quite get it. The story of the day, I think, maybe was Eduardo Rodríguez going 4 1/3 scoreless. I mean, I didn't have that on my bingo card. I think we worried about the quality of the pitching for this Venezuelan team. The bullpen's been great throughout the tournament, but the starters in particular were the area where you thought, hey, they're vulnerable, especially against the lineup as strong as Team USA earlier in the knockout round against Japan. Like, I think there were spots where that looked like it could have been the downfall of this club, and it shined through. I mean, and Erod's a guy that's been through a lot, right? Had a pretty bad knee injury earlier in his career, had some recurring knee trouble that's happened since, had myocarditis at one point. I mean, just all kinds of things have cost him time over the course of his career, and he had the changeup working in particular, right? I mean, there was that first inning when he threw to Judge that was just nasty, down and away. I kind of just felt like an extra moment of joy for a guy that's had a lot of setbacks and a lot of disappointments at various points over the course of his career, Trevor.
Yeah, it's always good to see. I think there's a couple of stories like that for them. There might be some guys, potentially full in that bullpen, who might get another opportunity or another look, possibly to get a big league job or maybe get back to the big leagues at some point. I'm thinking about Machado, the guy who set up, who's throws 100 like everybody else. But yeah, it was awesome to see, him perform the way he did. The thing is, though, especially with Erod and like Ranger Suarez, who threw, yesterday or 2 days ago, rather, like these guys, they remind me of each other quite a bit. They really quick pace, throw lots of sinkers, throw a bunch of pitches, hit your default spots, just pepper them. And Erod's done that. He's had years where it was just absolutely nails, and then he's had a lot of setbacks and things too. So I think he's fell out of our consciousness, but it didn't surprise me that he threw well. Especially, I think the advantage, especially in the WBC, is having faced big league pitching a lot and being in positions like this, but also knowing all the hitters on the other side is helpful. It's big. They didn't have to go throw a guy who maybe is like on the cusp of AAA, 4A guy right now, or a young guy or something who has really good stuff but just doesn't know the hitters as well. It can be like get big guys from Aaron Judge coming up. He was the right guy of who they had left to throw in a big spot situation because he doesn't get rattled. And that was what they needed, and then it just kind of came together because it's one of those games where it was going to be low scoring. I think, or it was going to be tight. I think we knew it was going to be tight, but it's always fun to root for. I mean, we could say they were the underdog, and they're a team that had never gotten this far, and we had a disappointing last time, and have a very rich baseball culture, and we're having a lot of fun. I mean, it's hard even being an American with USA on the other side. Like, it was still just, as a baseball fan, like you saw a bunch of guys' dreams coming true. So super cool to see how he did and see it pay off, and then see. I just don't think there was just for general baseball fans, there was really a losing situation last night. especially with the excitement at the end of the game. Thank God that happened to keep us on the edge of our seats.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the Bryce Harper homer off of Andres Machado, right? A changeup that got a lot of the play, and he smoked it out to center field. That tied the game at 2 in the bottom of the 8th, and I think really was a big moment for Bryce, even though it didn't end up putting Team USA on top for a win. I think he was starting to draw some heat as one of the key bats that hadn't delivered anything really over the course of the tournament. So those are the only runs allowed by Venezuelan relievers over those 3 knockout round games against Japan, Italy, and the U.S.
Trevor brings up a fascinating concept, though. The fact that Eduardo Rodríguez knew these hitters and was a veteran himself may have really helped him because, no matter what you think of some of the comments that Andy Pettitte made about not being ready or, whatever, or just the general competence of the staff, the American coaching staff, like a little bit of weird comments coming through. No matter what you think of that, there's no way that your preparation in the WBC is on the level of like the best 5-10 MLB teams. I don't think it can be because you don't have an organization the same way the Dodgers have an organization or the Yankees have an organization. You have an organization that plays games sporadically, once every few years, and there's undergoing change. Like Omar Lopez was talking about how he was the bullpen pitcher three WBCs ago, and then the manager last year. So he's learning in these like stints. I would never have put Luis Arias third myself, and there are some decisions that I found really weird at times during this tournament, but you have to that against the backdrop of like unfamiliarity with each other, lack of resources for a lot of these teams, and then just there's no parallel. So in the end, what it ends up being is Eduardo Rodríguez is like, what? I'm really good at putting my soft stuff low, and so that's what I saw in this game was really just sinker, slider, changeup, everything just bottom of the box, filling up the bottom of the box, going high when he had to, but just like he's like, I know these players. There's a couple players I have to worry about that have real good low ball swings, and everybody else I'm just going to do what I'm good at, So I thought that was interesting. The other thing that comes to mind is, there was a long talk about this after the game by the crew there about availability and this being March and how much availability had to do with this outcome. I wonder so Palencia was made available for a save situation. And so he pitched third time in four days. Like, I'll let Trevor comment on this, but I doubt that you're throwing hundreds often 3 times in 4 days in spring. I mean, that's got to be a weird thing for them. And if I were the Cubs, I would have said no. But they got a yes out of him. I don't know if they were more persuasive than America when it came to Mason Miller, or if they got lucky in terms of there was a save situation, because apparently, DeRosa was saying that Mason Miller was available for a save situation in the 9th inning. Could he have asked the Padres, like, can I use them in a tie situation in the 9th inning because they're the home team? I just feel like something about that Mason Miller versus Daniel Palencia did matter a lot in this game. I think it would have been tied and into the 10th inning if Mason Miller had pitched in the 9th inning.
I generally agree with that. I think Trevor can weigh in on the impact of a reliever ramping up this hard, this quickly. And maybe the answer is something we'll learn over the course of the season. Is this going to cost Daniel Palencia something health-wise later? I mean, it's a disappointing way to think about it, but it's on everybody's mind, unfortunately. It's like the timing of this tournament puts everybody in a position to possibly get hurt. It's been an undercurrent of this tournament since its inception. And I mean, how worried would you be about Daniel Palencia, who was phenomenal throughout this tournament?
I mean, when it comes to like really bad injuries too, like we'll find out pretty quickly if there's an issue. Like I don't think we're gonna be like in August, be like, well, he wouldn't be hurt now if he didn't do that 3 out of 4. Now 3 out of 4 is we're ringing alarm bells in the regular season as well. But that's just because the season's so long. Like it's concerning for the same reason. Now, there's also another thing that I would factor in. how many of these guys also play winter ball? Because they're in better shape now than the American guys are that didn't play winter ball. Like if they didn't really if he maybe played because a lot of times they play like the last 3 weeks of the winter ball season, or they go play the playoffs with their team to ramp up, and they're doing it anyways, right? And that sometimes it plays a factor. And we know that Mason Miller didn't play winter ball, so maybe it's a different concern there. And maybe they just were we really, really, really don't want him to throw 3 out of 4 days. Mason Miller also has he threw 27 innings in the minors in 3 years before he got to the big. He's been hurt so many times in his short career. I know we don't think not since becoming a reliever, but it is something that is still there, and so that's also another thing that might factor in. But Garrett Whitlock also, they were just pitch him whenever. It's not like he didn't pitch every day either. He pitched in every game. So it's he was okay to throw out there, and he also didn't look as sharp. He was trying to pace his way through it, because that's what he does when he's not feeling super sharp. He's like, I'm gonna throw a pitch every 3 seconds, and maybe I can just bull rush him, and that's a great way to do it. I saw he didn't look like he was feeling incredible either. So what's the difference? It's just the organization they're in. Yeah, it is the timing. It's a conversation we're going to constantly have, but there has to come to a point where it sounds like Venezuela's whoever talked to the Cubs said, this is how much it means to these guys. This is how much it means to me and them, and we've had the conversation. They just really, 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 really want to do it. And they're like, all right, there is a window there where it can happen, and then the window came up, and then they'll deal with it. And sometimes you just every time a guy goes out and throws off a mound to 100, no matter where he is, there is a risk that he's going to get hurt. I'm just sorry. I'm going to say it. Him going out and be it's spring training, 97, 98. You're still throwing too hard for UCL. Yeah. You're not supposed to throw that hard. So it's not meaningfully more risky. It's just not.
Well, it was wonderful to see how much it meant to Venezuela, to the fans, that they were so loud, and I loved all the singing and the instruments. Although there was some question of, there were all these approved instruments and non-approved instruments, and some people were saying, "Oh, MLB should get on this," and maybe. I mean, sometimes I'm a little annoyed by, the drunk dude in the vuvuzela at the soccer match, sometimes that can get annoying too. So, but in these moments, it really felt like top of the line, really exciting, really fun crowd. And the players themselves were all crying afterwards. I thought, Eugenio Suárez's, speech or whatever it was to Ken after the game was great. I mean, he's just talking about how much it meant to them. They were a family, and a lot of tears out there. So that I thought it was cool to see. And I just honestly, as a fan of baseball, I like to see new champions, and so we crowned a new WBC champion.
Yeah. Did you by the way, did you see the thing that I love Suarez's post game, but the thing that actually was the coolest thing, he hit the double, and he was sitting there because he did this when he hit the homer for the Mariners in Game 6 of the CS, and he was talking to the sky the whole time around, and then he was on second and he was doing it, but he's having a full conversation, which tells me he's had this either internal monologue going where he's this is going to happen, or I'm going to do this thing, or speaking to somebody who's passed, or a family member, and he's having the conversation, and then is see, I told you, which is super duper, it gives me goosebumps right now, imagining something happening and then doing it. There's nothing. I don't think there's a better feeling on the planet. So I was just noticing, there's guys who are yeah, that's for you or whatever. He's having he is talking to somebody, which means he's been talking to them when we haven't been watching too. And that was a really, really cool moment that I think was maybe under noticed, just how different that, because it's common to point up the sky or whatever, but how different his version of it was. And that was the one that stuck with me. I'm oh, he's dapping someone up, right? Dapping a family member or someone who is in the sky up right now. And it could be God. I don't know who he's talking to, but whoever it is, he feels connected to it, and it's really, really cool. And for that to be on a baseball field is awesome.
There was some real, like you hear platitudes sometimes. There seemed to be real energy behind it. He's talking about family. Omar Lopez, his discussion was like, after the game, he said, I couldn't do it without all these other coaches. And you're like, okay, well, that's nice to hear. Well, then when they go up in the press conference, he brings all of his coaches out with him. So he's not even doing the press conference himself. He's doing it with all of them. So, there, some kind of real things behind what they're saying. They're being honest with us and telling us really how they feel. And you got to see it by their actions as well as their words.
Yeah. I think it was hard to watch that game and not feel joy for Venezuela in their win. And so many of their key players, their leaders came through. It was Salvador Perez that started the third by getting on with a single. He had a pretty quiet tournament with the bat. Wilyer Abreu homered again. I think he's getting a lot more attention coming out of this tournament. But even in the ninth inning, like Luis Arias walked to start that sequence. Javier Sanoja pinch runs for him, steals second base by about the closest margin possible. I think the way that play happened, I think whatever was called on the field was going to stand. Like, I think that was just what it was. It was that close. Looked like he was safe to me, real time and on replay. I thought he just barely got in and beat that tag. And then, of course, Eugenio Suárez doubling to left center to plate that go-ahead and game-winning run. Just a lot of great moments from that finale, and just excited to see where it goes from here. And I think they talked about this in the postgame as well. I think it was Sal. It may have been some other players too. Just talking about being role models for the kids in Venezuela who will try to play on that stage in the future too. I think that also is kind of that long-term boost that you get from teams in this tournament reaching new heights of success. And I was stunned to see this. It came out in the Fox broadcast. It's the first international competition win in baseball for Venezuela since 1945. I would have assumed some title somewhere in between then. So just a huge deal there. A day off from work for everybody on Wednesday as well. So just some joy all around, and probably more introspection and questions to come around Team USA. Mark DeRosa wants to return as manager. I don't think there's a world in which they actually greenlight that. Mentioned the questions about the Mason Miller usage, whether the Padres were very specific about those conditions, knowing that those conditions barely existed, or whether DeRosa didn't ask enough. Maybe we'll never get the true answer to that one. And then the other question that I think is always kind of an unknown, and maybe this is something that the tournament as a whole could adjust in the future, is the availability of players on any particular day, because there is a certain amount of playing time and certain restrictions on pitching usage, even beyond the actual rules themselves, that we're not getting that information in the clearest of ways. So if it was like an inactive list for each individual game where you just knew someone was down, someone was up, I feel like that would actually just help us all understand a little bit more in terms of tactically what the manager is able to do in game and tactically what they're not able to do in game.
And maybe just a couple more days rest in between in the schedule. I mean, we talked about that a lot with Britt, but I'm just thinking like an extra day in there, maybe the Padres say, yeah, Mason Miller can go, So
just in this round, like they could have easily added one or two.
Yeah, the game should be today,
Yeah, that would have been easy.
Yeah.
What's the difference, really?
Yeah.
I do think a double header where you get the semifinals on the same day, a day off, and then the final would be much better.
If you need to keep it in the same window, or if you can expand it a couple of days, then
And you're reducing the likelihood of the 3 and 4, the back-to-back, any of the things that you're worried about because of the time of year the tournament is happening. But congrats again to Venezuela. It was just a blast watching that team.
So U.S. had the off day, too.
Yeah, they had the extra day.
I didn't even think about it. Like, I was like, oh, they did. Oh, wait, no, they had a day, and Mason Miller still wasn't available. Okay, yeah, now double doesn't make sense. Okay, anyway, yeah, you can slot that in wherever, but I did just realize that. So, and it really doesn't make sense, and now I'm mad about it. So let's talk for another 15 minutes with that new knowledge. No, I'm just kidding. We can get out.
Who do you want to manage this team, Trevor? Who would be your off-the-cuff nomination for a good fit looking 3 years into the future?
Oof. Give me like a David Wright. I don't know. I just threw that out there at the cap. It's like the DeRosa pick. Has he ever wanted to be a manager? I don't know. Like Pujols has wanted to be a manager before.
Eduardo Perez has wanted to be a manager. Maybe he would do it for somebody else. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that. Like, it's so funny. It's like DeRosa's like, oh, like last time, this was like, oh, I'm going to be the manager for the All-Star team. But now it's like, now we need a manager of the dream team. Like, we need managing, like a person who wants to be a manager, not just kind of like doing it for a tournament. Which I'm not saying that like that's what his skill set is, but like that was the approach before. So it didn't really matter. Now it seems to matter a lot more. So maybe we're having someone who like has managerial experience.
That's true. It used to be more like, hey, it's me and my buddies,
Yeah, it's like, someone from it's someone who's on MLB Network all the time. Like,
and it couldn't be a current manager, I think, because they're in spring training. They have like, I love the idea of voter, but like,
bring Bochy or something. Like, you'll be,
an older guy who's retired.
I'll do the WBC, but I don't want to do
one.
Like Matt. It's like someone who's had a lot of experience, who's retired and still around the game, but like doesn't want to do a full season. Or can't.
But might take it a little bit more seriously for that time period.
Bochy would have a blast. That would be a great one.
So yeah, we're already looking forward to it 3 years from now. That's building momentum off of the last WBC. If entering this tournament, we said, can they find a way to get the tournament to have higher notes, to hit higher levels than it did in 2023? I think the resounding answer was, yeah, they did. And they did it without the Shohei cheat code, too, which is even more impressive. Just from a pure entertainment perspective, like to have it pop this way without him being the centerpiece at the end, I think is great for the game. We all won getting a chance to watch it. At least that's the way I felt about it.
For the complaints about some of the American teams, ambiance or vibes.
Yes.
The next time we have this, it may be a different group of American players. It may be a younger group of American players. There may be different vibes. There may be more energy in the dugout or clubhouse than we saw necessarily.
I think the key to all of that, though, is authenticity. I don't want any team's players to try and have this manufactured fake energy or fake anything. And I think in a lot of ways, like, Trevor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like, part of the reason the vibes are the way they are with Team USA traces back to, like, youth baseball.
That is their vibe.
Yeah.
Like, that's just how we act. Like, we're not...
Infectious joy is not necessarily there in competitive youth situations.
Like, that's just how we act. Like, we're not suppressing anything. It's not there.
Right. It just doesn't exist.
And so, but it was there when we were kids, but maybe it's just like the nature of the game, the nature of getting to the big leagues and it being 160 games. Just too much.
This reminds me of German soccer. German soccer is so institutionalized. They have all this travel ball stuff. They have all this coaching. They get you when you're really young. They put you into the system and they grind you. And then it produces the most boring national version of the sport I think that exists.
Yeah. Really efficient and very like worker beat. I don't know. It's very like grind work. But that is the game. I understand it. There is value to that. But like, you need both. What I would love, because it's so funny, the Bryce Harper, 22-year-old Bryce Harper, he'd be bouncing off the walls of this thing. But like, it's so funny watching him just turn into the like buttoned up, like, this is the way that I am. Him and Judge having them be like, because he hit the homer, you can see Judge in the background going, like, they're joking, like, calm down, don't get too excited, because they hear it. They're like trying to take the identity, because him and Judge, that's how they act. But if you surround those two guys with the Pete Crow Armstrongs, and like you have a bunch of young guys who are all high energy, and then you have the veteran guys as contrast, where like they show little emotion with the young guys, then now we see this, like, that would be authentic to me. Like, that would be where they like let it out for a second, but I'm not going to give it. Grandpa's not going to get too excited. That dynamic is what exists in Major League Baseball. That's what exists in professional American baseball. That's very much part of the identity of it. And like having that be the way it works, that would be authentic with energy at the same time, where there would be guys can be who they are and they all work together. That is what I want to see from the United States, as opposed to like, you don't have to go do a drum circle. Like, we don't do drum circles. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that I didn't love the Venezuela, that every single guy was like, woo! Like, because me, I'd have been like I'm not, how do I do this? Like, that's me as a person would have been like, and they're all in it.
We don't have to do the dance circle.
Exactly.
Right.
Whatever the version of you is, and fit it into the group. And it felt like maybe they're getting scrutiny, and like all the young guys felt like they needed to chill because the big old guys were chilling. But I think if they had Roman Anthony was bat flipping and these guys were going crazy or whatever, like the young guys were doing it, I think the old guys would be like, I like that. I just think we're not there yet. We're not there yet with the United States, but we're going there.
Maybe in 3 years. You're right. A lot will change, though, for Team USA during that window. Now it is our pleasure to be joined by Lance Brozdowski, a familiar face, familiar voice. You've seen him on his YouTube channel. You've probably seen him during Cubs broadcasts. He's a player development analyst at Marquee. Lance has a great Substack as well. Lance, thank you so much for joining us.
How's it going, guys? I'm in Arizona right now, so I'm baking in 104-degree sun. It's lovely. Although I'm in a press box right now, obviously. So.
Glad we can get you some shade there in the press box. Good to get a little break from the sun with it being so early in the morning out there. Recently, Lance, you asked a group of front office people, coaches, some non-MLB folks, that'd be like facility owners, trainers, and agents, to do some work for you, answering some questions about pitching development and acquisition. And I'm very curious to know what you thought of some of these results. So the first question was just about, which team in baseball has the best quality. And you asked it in a way where you wanted everyone to give their top 5. So I'm not surprised to see the Dodgers at number 1, but the results came out kind of tiered. So across that group, and for those watching on YouTube, you'll see the list. We'll be sure to pop it in our Discord so you can kind of get a feel for how everything's stacked up. What surprised you the most in those responses?
What surprised me the most was the Dodgers still being number 1. I think I got a lot of individual pushback after people I sent the survey then saw the results, and they were like frustrated that the Dodgers were still up top. I think the hardest part I've realized in this survey process is asking a question in a way that you get the kind of response you want, or you want the survey participant to actually answer the correct question. So given it was spring training, given I was sending this to a lot of people, I really pitched it as like, this won't take a lot of time. So in that, in asking for the best, I combined major league and minor league, and then development and acquisition, which I think are, I guess you could split it and say like those are the 4 main pillars of the pitching development department from a very like high level view. So I was forcing the participant to make a judgment call on what they value the most. And I think perhaps the slight issue with this was that people just ended up reverting to like, who has done cool things in the past, Whereas like I was hoping it'd be a little bit more forward looking. So I massaged it and made my own top 30, which is at the end of the Substack post. But I get a lot of pushback on the Dodgers. They really walked a lot of guys in the minors last year. I think there's a lot of people in baseball who think that their process is not one that you could copy and paste to a team that perhaps has a lower budget, which is 29 teams in baseball. So they're taking a very, and a metaphor I got was hit it far and we'll get it on the fairway, which is, I think, really their minor league development philosophies. Like we don't care if we can make a 5 or a 4 in a rotation. We're hunting like 1s and 2s. And as a result of that, I don't know if that's perhaps attractive to other teams who don't have the ability to do that, given they need to convert on these like post round 5 types. But yeah, I was surprised that they came out. Yeah, they had 42 votes, nearly 80% of the participants who put them in their top 5, and about 54 respondents here. So it's a pretty high percentage, and they were the only team over 60% or seen on 60% of top 5s. So there's something they're doing, or some way they've convinced the league that they're still up top despite some pretty poor minor league stats in the last year or two.
Yeah, it seems like it's in opposition to the Mets approach, maybe, where the Mets approach seems to be to get the most out of every single guy, even if it's to make him a 5 or make him a 1 or whatever it is. And they've used that to acquire bats, acquire rentals at the deadline. Mets pitchers are really filtering through. That's somewhat of a new thing. And I wonder how much residuals, you talk about that with the Dodgers, but how much residual is there for the Guardians and Rays as well? Like, are they resting on their laurels to some extent? Or what they're doing now as good as what they did before? What do you see when you look at the Guardians and Rays and you think about that sort of Dodgers effect as well?
It's a great point. Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing. It's hard to forecast in anything. And I think it's especially hard to forecast in baseball in particular. It's fun to get excited about teams like, the Nationals and the Cardinals, and even like the Marlins, or a team that came up as like a riser. Those teams are fun, but as you hear people get, super excited about what they're doing, at the same time, there's a lot of acknowledgement from other orgs that they have like a long ways to go, because the R&D budgets have been so low, it's going to take them a really long time to build out the tooling to actually support the coaches. So despite the fact that maybe they have a new flashy director of pitching, the actual ability to get the third starter on a AA team better, AA affiliate better is probably not as good as some of these better teams. I would say the Rays and the Guardians are in two very interesting spots. I think the Guardians are squarely like a top, let's say, the tiering I did was basically a top 7, and then you have like the next 7. And this was heavily based off the survey. So the top 7 is the Dodgers, Mets, Guardians, Yankees, Brewers, Mariners, Red Sox. And then I have a tier split, and then you go to the next 7. The Rays are at the top of that next 7. I think the Guardians do a very good job in a variety of ways. And I think they were a team that's pretty early on biomechanics and Kinetrax and understanding how that actually combining the throw and ball flight is something that I think is super important and probably where the next edge comes from a lot of these organizations. The Rays are a fascinating one because they're at the industry. They don't do a good job on the delivery side, and they know a lot about ball flight. And given that other teams are catching up on the ball flight side of things, so think about like optimizing shapes, I wonder whether they are just a team that may fall behind slightly unless they're able to really quickly catch up in some other capacity. Because I know some people who were on the Rays and went to other organizations and were like, wow, there's so much about the throw I didn't really understand. It's like, oh, that's interesting. That tells me a lot about where you came from. So I would say, I think it's appropriate to split the Rays out and put them in the second tier, not amongst the top, despite some of the development wins they've had. But yeah, I think and I don't know if I answered your part of the Guardians, but I think the Guardians do a really good job from an integration standpoint between, I would say, R&D side back to coaching level. And also, like, their acquisition development is very much tied together, which I think is important. So even if maybe they're not number 1 in both those angles, they probably are top 10 in each, which it seemed like in asking for some qualitative factors as to how a team becomes the best, that was something people brought up. It's like, if you're really good at acquisition, poor at development, I don't think you can be top 5. And the inverse is true as well. If you're very good at development, but poor acquisition, you can't be top 5. So the Guardians split the balance well. I would bet on the Guardians doing a better job from a development standpoint over the next 3 years than the Rays.
I actually have a theory that I actually want everyone's maybe input on this, and especially because I think the Guardians and the Rays have been lumped together for a long time when it comes to pitching development, and myself knowing quite a bit now about the Rays philosophy and the Guardians philosophy, they seem very, very similar in that they get a lot of that out of their pitchers, or have at least in the last 5-7 years, but they do it with completely different approaches, and also I think with goals in mind. So you mentioned, for example, the Rays being very, very conscious of ball flight and how to make your pitches like really quote unquote nasty. But they're not so worried about the delivery of the pitch, like being hyper consistent. That's where the one target thing came from. That's why they went and got a guy like Joe Boyle. You can't throw strikes, but you got crazy good stuff. Let's just simplify that, skip it, and try to get you as good as we can, as fast as you can, so that you can contribute to our big league team. And then before we have to pay you, while the Guardians are trying to build maybe less, they have the less of the high end guys, but they're having these guys peak so they can contribute to their team for more years, like a Hunter Gaddis or a Ciccone or Bybee. Like all these guys, they keep getting those guys. So I guess. Does that ring true in that the Rays are trying to get their guys to a certain point a little bit faster, and the Guardians are trying to get guys that are going to maybe be more stable and instead of a revolving door, but they're both trying to produce wins in that way? I feel like that's why maybe the Rays have felt like they've fallen back a little bit, because it's a little bit more of a hit or miss approach than, say, the Guardians, which is very much like if you get up and you're getting innings with them, you're probably going to have to struggle for a while and show that you don't have the ability to have that stability in order to get moved out for somebody else who can. That feels very like on par. Those sounds like that's their philosophy. So I've been wanting to ask you that question actually, because we've crossed paths a couple times, but this is a perfect time to do it. So does that feel, and what you've heard, does that sound like the one of the differences that it feels like they have between those two organizations?
I agree. Yeah. If you look at aggregated minor league data, these two teams have some pretty strong fingerprints, I would say. The Rays throw really hard. Their sliders are, I believe, top 2 in terms of raw velo, and they're in zone a ton on everything. I've also heard anecdotally from talking to people that they don't really do the best job of giving like their players a bunch of information at lower levels. I actually got DM'd by someone who has a friend in an organization, or in the Rays organization, and that individual wanted me to pull his minor league plots and splits because he didn't have access to them, which I don't entirely know if that's true, but it seemed crazy to me. And I actually brought this up to another individual in another org, and they were like, well, yeah, because they just throw four-seam slider in the minors. And then I back-checked this and looked at, okay, I believe it was sub age 26 starting pitchers to throw X amount of innings. It was some like minimum. What does your repertoire diversity look like? And the Rays were, I think, one of two teams that had below 3 pitches on average for their minor league starting pitchers, which is a complete deviation from the modern MLB approach of like we're seeing mixes expand considerably. So you have like the Mets and the Astros and some of these other teams that are way up on the complete invert side of that. The Guardians are the team that have the lowest four-seam fastball in the minor leagues in terms of raw average velocity, partially because I think they can just develop the velocity side and they're trying to make those 4s and 5s. They also, I think, have top 2 extension on the four-seam fastballs. They really love lefty extension. If you think of a Joey Cantillo, Matt Tugboat Wilkinson from Canada WBC, some people have seen. So I would agree with you wholeheartedly that they get lumped together, but they're very, very different organizations from what their models have a bias of. That's a lot of the time when I brought up this aggregated minor league data to coaches, they're like, that's really just model bias. It's what the model is saying, and therefore they are acquiring, rather than like an internal philosophy. It's not like the Rays are entering their player dev meetings in the offseason for a minor leaguer and being like, hey man, you can only throw four-seam slider because we're pretty confident that if you can't get minor league hitters out with those 2 pitches, you're not going to be a major league starter. Whereas the Guardians are probably like, no, I'd rather try to take that guy. And if like we could get him to be a 5, that's a huge, huge win for us developmentally.
Well, just looking at the Red Sox, they're now in the top 7, and the Mets are now, in the top 7 according to your rankings. And, I wouldn't say that they would have been there 3 years ago. And, so I'm asking the opposite question now, which is like sort of how quickly can a team move on these ranks? I'm asking because I was just looking through spring training Stuff Plus numbers, and I found 3 Miami Marlins relievers in the top 15 of overall Stuff Plus. And these are guys that nobody's ever heard of. I mean, Jack Ralston, Josh Eknes. I mean, maybe some people from the WBC remember him.
He's good.
And I forget who the third was, but I was going through there looking for starters, and I kept getting, oh, that's a reliever. Oh, he's 28. Oh, he's 30. He's with the Marlins. He's with the Marlins. He's with the Marlins. And I know that like it's going to be a tougher road for them to produce, an entire system that works from top to bottom, with the major leagues, in the minor leagues, all in hand, all using great data and doing the things that, the Red Sox and Mets are doing now. But that seemed to be a little bit of signal where, like, how quickly would you move a team like that if you started to see things like that pop?
I would say that it has to do a bit with how, this is going to sound brutal, but how much they purged prior people in the organization. If you go back and think of thou who shall not be named, Mr. Luna, they came in and just completely wiped everything in that org. And it's a really like brutal way to think about things. But the thing with those 2 orgs, the Marlins and the Red Sox, is they turned over a lot of staff in the last couple of years, and the funny thing with both those orgs, Marlins and Red Sox, is they also both cut a dramatic amount of four-seam fastball usage in the minors specifically. So I think that is sometimes a way for me to look at things and signal like a dramatic philosophical shift in a way that I'd be more willing to accelerate them. Where perhaps a team like the Cardinals are interesting, where they brought in a bunch of new minds, but they didn't completely wipe everybody from a prior thinking who's been in that organization. So I hate to say that because like it's people getting fired, but
the Nationals are changing right in front of us too. Like the Nationals in spring training have they're down the most in fastball usage, and that's
exactly,
but how much, purging they done. On the other side, the Orioles, really turned over their staff a lot, and they're in your bottom 5.
Well, no, I have them in the second tier of 7, so they're in the top half.
Okay.
Yeah, they're an interesting org. Like I think that they're on the up and up as well. They had some bad raps because they had a bunch of Tommy John surgeries. I want to say it was 22 or 23. I don't remember when. They blew out a ton of arms in the minors, and my understanding was they had like a pretty big overhaul of, I believe it was like their Biomech medical department. And I think they're on the up and up. They also have some really fun names in the minors. I really like Trey Gibson. Braxton Bragg, I think, is down with injury right now, Tommy John, but They have a lot. Luis De Leon's interesting. Like they definitely have some names there, and I think they're on the up and up. I think they're appropriately ranked in like the top half, I would say.
One of the questions you asked this group was just, what factors matter in pitching development and acquisition, and you left that as like an open-ended thing. So trying to bucket things, I think, was probably pretty challenging with the responses. But I was surprised that organizational alignment didn't come out higher as something that matters, because I think in order to maximize ceiling, you need everybody to be on the same page. I think that's why what you referenced in Houston and more recently in Miami, where getting old ideas, people who are unwilling to adapt, like to push folks out of the org and to get everybody rowing in the same direction, that seems kind of essential to actually maximizing ceiling across the board.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm happy. I had a friend of mine, shout out my buddy Gavin McClanahan here, who I sent this survey to prior, and I was like, is there anything I should adjust? And he's like, you should ask for qualitative factors, because prior I didn't have this question. And so he told me to put just like an open-ended thing, like just get people to like say how they're ranking the best. And to this point, like the top three things were, number one, this is frequency, I would say. So maybe not raw importance, but how much it was brought up. And me asking people, what did you consider, in your top five? Stuff and pitch quality was number one. Number two is velocity development, basically the same thing. Acquisition strategy is interesting. I often call that fingerprint, but having some distinct way you're approaching things. And then fourth was like value and war, which I would say is more like raw performance. So I thought there was a subtle disconnect between, okay, it seemed like people ranked on the war value of like, who have you actually produced? Whereas they were saying they actually like velo development, stuff quality, and perhaps like a strategy angle. So I think that naturally, perhaps the bias in the people I've asked is that they're very process driven, which isn't totally surprising. I'm a data nerd. I tend to glob with people who are data nerds. I try to get some diversity of response. I definitely asked some more people I would consider not old school, but not like, the Kyle Bodys of the world, so to speak, where they're like so forward thinking that they're ripping up orgs and making them better immediately. So that was interesting to me, where it's like you rank on who has actually created value, but what you value maybe isn't totally tied back to that, so to speak. But stuff in velo development and the ability to do that is really number one. But I agree with you, DVR. I think perhaps when you get the nuance between, say, number 14, which is the back half of my second tier, and number 1, 2, 3, you're looking at more of these peripheral factors where it's like, track, maybe like the org alignment point you mentioned, like that is probably how you get from like 7 to 1, as opposed to hanging in like the 7 to 14 area, where you're really good at developing stuff, acquisition strategy is pretty good, but maybe you guys aren't totally synced from who you're kicking in the draft standpoint relative to what your org can develop. And maybe that has some influence on like your actual ceiling as an organization. But to the Red Sox point, their most recent draft class was fascinating. They took 3 pitchers that in my draft cycle have done some stuff for MLB Network in the past, and I enjoy that period of the year where I can talk to people and get thoughts. All 3 of those guys, Kyson Witherspoon, Marcus Phillips, and Anthony Einson, I got negative reports from other orgs on every single one of them. Whether it was like, I don't like the body, I don't like the throw, or Einson had no fastball shape and it was like pure slider approach. Kyson Witherspoon, some people thought that, the actual repertoire development would be really tight with. And they took all 3 of them and spent like $9 million on them. So I'm fascinated from their standpoint of like, okay, they took a gamble there, And it's like, if those 3 guys can ascend through, I just released like a top 40 pitching prospects update, and I kept all those guys outside of my top 40. But the first note I put in my like just missed was like, I'm scared that I'm missing on all 3 of these guys, because if they can convert those guys into like top 30 prospects, like I think you do this survey in 2 years, they might be the number 1. But you got to take shots. Like kudos to them in a draft that maybe I wouldn't say was light on pitching, but wasn't like the Chase Burns, Hagen Smith draft. They went in and ID'd big dudes who cut the ball and they think they could get velo up with, and every single one of those guys in springs looks like they're throwing harder. So I got a little off on a tangent there, but to DVR's point in terms of like the synergy between departments, I was trying to make the point that I think the Red Sox are doing that really well. So to me, it's like they're top 5 or top 7, but you could almost put an up arrow on them in terms of like, this could look really good if they trade one of those guys for a deadline piece and get a really good piece back. And then Tyson becomes a horse in the rotation and Marcus is like a 3 or a 4. It's like you get one draft, you spend $8 million, and the surplus there from a raw value perspective could just be absolutely insane for them.
Yeah, I think the interesting part of your question is like you're asking these people to evaluate these other organizations, and I think they may think that organizational alignment is very important, and yet it might be really hard to evaluate that from the outside.
It's a great point. Yeah. It's hard to do that prospectively too. Maybe retrospectively a little easier based on draft strategy or something, or blowing out, or not blowing out, but like underperforming top 3-round picks for the arm side. That maybe is the way to do it, but it's really hard to do unless you're only retrospectively, if that makes sense.
Right. But your example is right. I mean, that's where the alignment comes in, is like the scouts said they are deficient in these ways, but then your, director of pitching said those are ways that we've shown that we can actually change pitchers.
Exactly.
And then, the single A, coach said, yes, I'm proficient in turning this information into actual on-field results. And so that's an organizational alignment. And yeah, I agree. I think it's actually, if we're just going to do a ranking of importance, I think it's way high. But if you're talking about how you're ranking pitch, I think it would be really difficult to see from the outside.
This is so fascinating because you make a great point, and I get, when I try to answer questions about like how I see someone's an organization's pitching development either getting better or worse. It's hard to tell because the only thing we know for certain is what results have been up to this point. But the fascinating thing is there are people writing reports on the guys you mentioned, and those are based on results that they're seeing at this point of them, and it could be pitch shape, that's results as well, but it's what they know right now, and then it's going to vary. Then the process takes over, and then everyone says, okay, what process, and then to get them to get the results we want at the big league level, and that process is going to be wildly different, and you're just intuiting it based on who they are choosing, and that's why that's so fascinating. So for everyone at home, it's like this is a constant. There's constant people be like, here's the results, process person, what do you think? And they're like, well, this process could take them to these results. And then you got to check and you have to check. So these things take time. It's funny you're mentioning the Red Sox too, because I know Craig Breslow personally fairly well. I was in the clubhouse with him in 2017 for a whole year. And just listening to him speak, the way that he operated as a player was very much this like, it'll come. Like just if you put you just put the things in place and then just keep running it, and eventually you'll find out whether or not your theories are working, and you can adjust. And obviously he's come under fire a lot from some of the decisions he made early in his tenure, but like you got to be patient, and this is not a game you can be patient, especially when people are talking about it and they want to get better faster, and also they don't want to spend money or whatever. So in pitching development, and now actually I've been working with kids, with 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and what they think about and what they're being told is so fascinating because they get very obsessed with the shapes and the velocity, like trying to they throw a pitch and they walk off the mound all the way back to look at the iPad. Like I'm like, hey, you gotta throw 2 pitches in a row sometimes, like before you leave the field. Like, and it's interesting because they're right. They should care about that stuff, but at the same time, like there's also a process to this, and you have to know that sometimes you're not going to get the shapes you want. You're trying to move from one to another, and the feedback is going to help you as much. And that's something that like most of these kids like haven't thought about at all. They're only looking at the shapes. But if I were 18 and no one taught me either, I would do the same thing. And that's what's so fascinating is how it's changed. And then when they move on, they're like preparing to go to the next place, college, whatever, and they're like trying to build shapes only exclusively because they know that that's what people are looking at, and they're kind of right. So to bring it all the way around for everyone at home, it's like that is the number one thing that you look at first is like, are there shapes here? This was the Luno Astros thing. Like they figured that out. They went to get guys in that way, and then a lot of organizations did it. That's where it comes from, and that's still kind of the North Star. But the next level is when you're trying to anticipate who's getting good at this and who isn't, what organizations are, you then have to look at the people in that middle part, the process of going from A to Z. If they have a track record of getting guys to do that, even if it's not in that organization, that is the best way to intuit to it, whether or not we're getting an up arrow or a down arrow for these organizations, which is fascinating, which I think that like looking at your list, a lot of this stuff, if you just like look like that it comes out in the data and how people are thinking. Everyone you've asked is thinking, and it's absolutely fascinating. It changes case to case, but it's funny because I'm sure you mentioned already. It was so hard to bucket this stuff. I can't imagine 4 questions. Like everyone's thinking different things, but if you just kind of think about it, it kind of gives you like, oh, here's all the things could have gone in, and it's really informative in a different way. So well done.
Thank you.
But it's fascinating. Like we could talk. I can obviously talk about this all day.
Well, I'm hearing a bit of a question in here, I think, which is, let me just post this. This is what I'm thinking, listening to Trevor, is when you sort through minor league data all the time, you're talking about, for example, the Rays being, having a really tight arsenal in the minors, in the low minors and stuff like that. When you're doing this, I've heard you talk about who throws the most fastballs, who throws the most fastballs with ride, who throws the most with the most extension, and that's kind of what Trevor's talking about, the shapes mattering. But I'm also wondering about like competing and like results. So like, do you ever look at results when you're sorting through minor league stuff, and what kind of results? Like, I mean, something maybe like K-BB, which is a process level result. What sort of results do you look at when you're looking at in the minor leagues?
Yeah, I have a Sierra number and I have a K-minus walk. So I'd say those are the two temples that I use to look at raw results. I could pop that up right now actually and just walk it through. But okay, results here. Last season minor leagues. So this I throw out complex stuff. I don't know what to do with that data for the most part. So top 3 in terms of K walk are the Mets, the Rays, and the Rangers, which are a very interesting team to have up there. Boston, Detroit, Toronto right after that. So again, rough validation. The bottom, Arizona had a wildly awful season last year in the minors. I have no idea what's going on there. They had a sub 10% K-minus walk, and their Sierra was like near 5.
What do you think is going on? Like their hitting side seems fine, right? Like the hitting side, they identify good hitters, they've developed good hitters. They always score more than you might think when you look at that. But there seems to be something wrong with Arizona pitching.
I did not get the best read on like what is going wrong there. I feel like I have a roughly good read on like why. I mean, the Rockies are the Rockies, the Angels are the Angels. Like the Athletics were mentioned a lot as a team that wasn't up there, but they made some pretty decent strides between 24 and 25 on the minor league side. So if you're gonna like up arrow a team in the bottom, like I think they're roughly around there as like, okay, historically maybe people are like turning their nose up at them, but they did a great, like the acquisition development of Gates Jump has been awesome. I think that is like a piece that you could put on there as like they probably shouldn't be like on that bottom 3 team. The D-backs, I have a really tough time understanding what's going on. I know they brought in, I believe, an individual from the Phillies and the Orioles in the last 2 years, and they recently just grabbed someone from the Pirates. So again, it gets to that point where it's like, okay, they brought in new people that have good rapport in the industry and have a good rap from people I've talked to, but it doesn't seem like they've like turned over any staff or anything in a way that always makes me a little bit hesitant that those individuals coming in will have the autonomy to go, what you have been doing is wrong, therefore we need to do this. Like I worry a little bit about like bringing new people in, but leaving existing people and going like, this is how we're going to do things. It's like, what are those rooms like from a decision-making standpoint, That's what I worry about with them. Perhaps I worry about that a little bit with the White Sox, but I've also heard the White Sox is mostly just like they just don't spend money on the minors in terms of development and R&D. So like that is also another
the Angels
theme.
Problem.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
The Angels
Too, the
right?
Angels actually, from the people I've talked to, have actually pretty amazing tools there. Like they have the seam shift guy in Barton Smith. Like it's kind of wild to me. They have this rap where I don't know if it's a decision-making thing or what, but it's definitely more top down, I would say, than like bottom up being more like the R&D. What are you actually funneling? That's the other thing too to separate out here is just like, you're not spending money like on development in the minors. Like we're seeing now, you see all these things like, oh, this team just renovated their spring complex and they finally have data. We saw this at the Nats, like that means they were behind for a while, like they're trying to catch up. Like that's not good. Maybe you could put the up arrow on some of these teams, but the Nats are a fascinating one where they got far and away the most like rising votes, which I agree with. But again, to my point, like they purged a lot of people there and brought in new minds. So I think the acceptance of those philosophies will stick a little quicker and allow them to like get to the middle of the pack really fast, and then from there, it's like, it's probably a long tail for them to figure out how to become as good as like the Yankees and the Mets and some of these other orgs that have laid the foundation for the last 4 or 5 years. But yeah, I'm unfortunately don't have like the best answer as to what's going on in Arizona, but it's one of the worst from an aggregated minor league data standpoint. It's one of the worst seasons I've ever seen. Like I was going back to like 21 and it's like to be under 10 K-minus walk and their xFIP was like above 5. So like, again, I know they play in weird parks and that is going to have some effect, but some of the other teams like that are in the PCL and stuff, like the Padres and the Dodgers and some of these other orgs were like more, I'd say middle of the pack to below. Like the D-backs were like last. By far last. So I don't know what happened last season in the minors there, but they got to fix that. And I do not know how to do it, but it's really bad results. Like, I can't imagine what those off-season combos were like. Well, like, what are they looking at? Are they like trying to pull any positives? Like, I don't know. Maybe they gained a little bit of velo, but you throw up K-Minus Walk and Sierra on the board and you see 30th and 30th. Like, you can't be too happy about what you did in the prior season.
No, an overhaul seems necessary there. It is important to call out the environments. I mean, certainly not the only team dealing with the PCL affiliate, but Amarillo at AA, it's a critical level. I think it's the most difficult park in that league to deal with too. So those last two stops before the majors are particularly tough on Diamondbacks pitchers. So that's probably wreaking a little bit of havoc on their development.
I think so.
Looking ahead, you think about the future question you put out there, the Nats pop, but who do you think will be regarded much more highly for pitching development and acquisition looking 2-3 years into the future?
Yeah, I'll go with the team that got no top votes and no bottom votes here, just because it seems like we've talked about all the others. But the Blue Jays are an interesting one. They have, I always bring up this term of fingerprint, but they have some of the highest release heights in the minors, which is deviating a little bit from some of this current research we've seen around slots dropping. And that, I know Driveline just put out a piece on that, allowing like a little more access to velo. And I know, you've done some stuff on like that being a little bit better on the injury side. I think Trevor as well has posted some content on that. So they're interesting to me because at least they have some difference here in terms of like what they're trying to do, which I like. Like, I don't know, like if everyone's on the low slot supinator in 3 years, like, is it actually that the guy with the 6'4" release is slightly more advantageous just because the hitter mental map is a little bit shallower? Like, that's maybe an interesting way to approach things. They also throw a ton of splitters, which I know Eno's mentioned a bit. Major leagues last year, they had a ton, but I like, again, like org philosophy, model bias, like they were, I believe, second highest in splitter usage in the minors. So I like where they're at. I think it seems like the industry squarely thinks they're a team to watch rather than one that some people thought was bad and some people thought was good. But the other teams there, like the Nats, are interesting to follow. The Marlins I think they were the highest concentration of rising votes without more than 2 worst votes. So it seems like the consensus there is that whatever they did has worked, perhaps, or maybe they just got a lot of credit for what they did prior with their like power changeup idea. Maybe some people still have that in their head, and then you combine that with the fact that they cut a ton of forcing usage and their stuff is way up in the minors, which Eno seems to be aware of from the stuff that he's looking at. Like, I've heard their Dominican complex is like absolutely insane. I've seen guys like throwing 101, sitting 101, and it's like, I don't even know who this guy is. Like, they're breaking things from what I understand. Like, I've heard some pitchers in that org say, like, I don't know why they want me to throw this pitch. I have no feel for it. I'm striking it 35% of the time. And they're like, you need to throw that 40% of the time. And it's like, but I mean, I think that their kind of like bull in a China shop approach is like, if you pure KPI they're looking at there is like make major league pitchers, I think that number is going to go up, despite the fact they might break some arms and like frustrate some people. Like, if they're hunting for the KPI of like, we're making major league pitchers, then you have to hunt stuff. And they're doing it in a way that really accelerated them, I think, from the prior regime, which was a little bit behind, but did have a very specific way of getting certain pitchers better, which you do have to give them some credit for.
Did you get any, like, was that like pushback where they were like annoyed? Because
the Marlins.
The guys? Marlins are doing bull in the China shop. The Marlins are doing the thing where they're calling from they're calling pitches from the dugout. Like, it seems like the Marlins are the new Rays in that they're like they don't care about.
I don't think they care what anybody else thinks. I don't, and I mean,
or the players themselves either.
The players themselves. Yeah, I got pushback on it for sure. I think if you poke around some agents on guys who maybe underperformed in that org, you'll hear consistently like, I don't know what they're doing. And it's like, I've talked to some of these people one-on-one and I'm like, listen, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, the results got a lot better and like everyone thinks they're good. So like, is it just one of those things where they become perhaps an org where other smart orgs can maybe poach guys and go, okay, we get that your philosophy is this, but this guy that you're trying to break by throwing sink, like, he actually is more of a like 4, and we could think we could get him to supinate more on Sunday, like a cut 4 guy. Like, maybe that's where they end up. And if they lose some guys, like, does that loss outweigh the benefit of them really being more aggressive on stuff and development and making major league pitchers? Like, I don't know. I think the net effect is good, even if on the individual basis you might hear some like, I don't know what they're doing, or my pitcher was not happy at single A that they had him throwing 3 pitches that he just learned 3 weeks ago in a start. Like, It's fun. It must be fun. But I imagine if like your agent, as an agent, like your incentives are like for this guy to be good,
or as a player,
exactly. And if he's got a 12% walk rate, and they're really going to promote him, like I think that's maybe where it gets tough. Is like, what is that pitcher's KPI for him to improve? Is it just like get your stuff plus up? So like, are you going to promote him if he has a 14% walk rate at A ball? It's like, I don't know. Like, that's a tough question to answer, And then if you do promote the 14% walk rate guy, you have another guy who maybe has less stuff, but he's 8% walk. That guy's then going to be pissed because he's like, I'm a better pitcher right now than him. Why are you sending him to IA, AA, not me? So it's like, I'm fascinated on how internal conversations happen in that org from this guy gets promoted, this guy doesn't standpoint.
Being different, being aggressive in that way, all seems like kind of logical. I mean, I don't think Miami's ever going to be a massive free agent destination just based on how they spend, right? Ownership and everything there, no matter how it changes. They're just not aggressive that way. They're going to be drafting, developing, trading for guys that they have club control over. So I don't know if they have to worry about pissing people off as much because they're not trying to get people to choose to play there.
Yeah, I think you're spot on.
Yeah, exactly. I can speak from experience, 100%. That is what's happening. And it's funny, the thing you guys are talking about is this conversation has been happening since the beginning of time amongst players like, oh, I'm not a prospect, so I don't get a whatever. But so we don't really know what the front office conversations are like. But what you're the kind of the two ways to approach it, I think that the Guardians are a good way to explain to throw in here as well, because they don't operate in that way. They don't have the resources in terms of like money and people, but there's a lot of organizations, Cardinals and the Rays do this as well. It's let's just break a bunch of stuff and then see who comes out of the end. And they basically hyper focus their actual human capital, the resources of coaches, because you can't sit there and give one coach per one player to get them to their peak. You have to kind of choose your thing that you believe that you can get the most out of. And a lot of times someone comes in, they look at who's already there, because those are the guys you have, and then you try to be like, where's the highest, where's the lane that will give us the most success? Let's just hammer that. And then if guys get left in the side because they don't fit in the model, then hopefully, we can get something for them if someone sees something value for them, and then we get something for them when they come trade for them or they try to grab them. And that's why, I think that's kind of like how the Mariners and the Rays constantly have been swapping pitchers for 10 years. It's because I think they have different philosophies, but they're complementary in that the guy that one team doesn't want is constantly what the other team does want. And so they always have this, and then you get a relationship between the executives, and then that's the first person they call. This guy's not going to fit. We're not going to get the big leagues, but you might like him. What can you give us? And that's happening. And that's kind of why you see the same teams trading with the same teams a lot too, is because sometimes their pipeline, there's an unofficial connection happening there. So it's fascinating because I mentioned the Guardians. The Guardians, they're more like, these are the guys, and we believe that the way that we operate, if we just get them to peak, if everyone's peaking, because we think that if we give them the time and the effort, the guys we choose, we believe we can get them to peak and be really efficient as pitchers, then they will be big leaguers, and they'll be there for a while, and they'll be our core for a while. Their bullpen's been their bullpen. The main guys have been there for a few years, but they're all controllable. How do you get a bunch of dudes in their first or second year to be your bullpen for 6 years? That's really rare. It's really hard to do, and they've done it better than anybody. And it's because I think they widen their resources. They're like, we're going to give a wider score per guy of resources, but we're not just going to throw things against the wall, because I think that's just the way they're put together. So it's just fascinating, because you're completely right. When teams are getting better quickly, you're going to see this, break things. This is our lane. Do this a lot, and then see what happens. And then hopefully they can get success for a bit to where they can then kind of spread those resources.
It makes me think of the Red Sox coming in, and the first thing they did was, hey, let's screw fastballs, And that's not necessarily what they're doing now anymore. Now they're trying to have guys with better fastballs that you can actually throw. They're not in the bottom of the league anymore this spring in terms of fastball usage. That's not their number one thing. But yeah, when you first come in, you're trying to have an ethos, trying to have an idea at all. So you're just like,
what do we have right now that can make us good quickly? And then we will figure out how to make the crappy stuff better so that we can then find places to use it. But the first thing we can do is fix this very obvious inefficiency. And so that's what we're seeing with the Marlins and with the Nationals, and that's what they're doing. And so when a team sucks at pitching development, and then they bring a bunch of new people in, pay attention. Are they breaking something? Are they like completely changing their philosophy right at the gate where it's jarring? That's usually a good sign. I know it feels like it's not. And as a player, it does suck to know that like there's guys there that might be close or have success who might just get left behind now. But it's an adapt or die game. If it's not that, it's something else. Like that's just the way baseball is. But you kind of have to end your career with none of the same pitches you threw at the beginning. That's at the end of the day, that is what's going to get you 10 years now. And it's going to be fascinating to watch now for the next 10 years how this works with all these organizations kind of hopping on board with this philosophy.
Where are the Cardinals, Lance, in this idea? You know, like they've got a bunch of guys that are popping in my stuff numbers this spring. Dustin May looks like he's kind of the old Dustin May, actually. His body's bigger, and he's throwing the old four seam, and he's throwing harder. Richard Fitz is popping again. Even Matthew Liberatore is popping in a stuff model. Like, you know, these are old players that, you know, some of them, you know, Liberatore was acquired by previous regimes, but they seem to be doing something different. I think Liberatore is cutting his four seam now. You know, so those are little things where you're like, ooh, like, are they turning it around quickly? You know, and I think about like the Marlins were doing some things right with pitching development. So
Definitely.
There's some organizational inertia, and the Cardinals, like, they seem to be okay at like identifying guys with command. So could they have less far to go? Do the Cardinals not need to break everything and just be like, okay, well, we're pretty good at identifying guys with command. Let's just take those guys and up their stuff. And so we can leave their scouts alone, and they can basically keep doing the same job, but we're going to do a little different job in like tweaking those arsenals once you get them into the organization.
Yeah, they got the 4th most rising votes, and I think they got like the 7th most worst votes. So they're in that bucket of like definitely on the up and up, I would say. They are fascinating to me because they brought in an individual from the Guardians org and an individual from the Mariners org. And then I think they also brought in someone from the Pirates. And obviously Hein Bloom's there now. So they have like an interesting like combination. And I think David Lauria of Fangraphs, I want to say, did an interview with Rob Strofolio, who's the individual from the Guardians, who's now I think AGM level with them. And he talked about how he thought it was interesting they have this synergy from other orgs where it's like, we liked what happened in my org on this side, I didn't like on this. And then I wouldn't say they're going around the table and saying this, but you could think of it metaphorically. Like they had a lot of people from relatively good orgs come together, and now we're like trying to come up with their own philosophy. So my subtle worry is I do think they probably still have a bit of a ways to go, but I wonder if the perception of them will be positive, particularly because it seems like they're like hunting improvements from the major league side down. Whereas like perhaps the Marlins came in and were like, we're doing it all. Or like some other orgs come in and maybe the powers that be are a little more hesitant to like break stuff at the top, and they come in and they're like, we'll give you A ball and high A, double A to do stuff. And then you see it dramatically stuff improves there. So I wonder if the Cardinals are going like top down. William Doyle, Tanner Franklin.
That's a big difference.
It is because they're getting some of these results.
Yeah, and when Farhan was running the Giants, he was very actually conservative in the lower levels. And, you know, we saw some things. The Giants were like, they were one of the first organizations to push 40 and 45% on sliders, you know, but they did that in like AAA, you know, with guys that are like, he's probably a reliever. Go 45% slider. It'll help your stuff number. We'll trade you. We'll put you in the bench, you know. So he was a little bit more like, you know, the job of the low minors is to create ball players and to like, you know, and work on every pitch and work on command, work on everything. And then as you get into AA and AAA, we put you in the sorting hats, and then we kind of like, you know, separate you. So I don't know. There's different philosophies for the top down and bottom up. I love that. Just to finish up with you, Lance, I think, you know, you talked about having a prospect ranking, and you know, I wonder how much your idea of how good the orgs are colors your prospect rankings. You know, I just wanted to throw this up on the screen. I didn't get this to you before, Lance, but this is just top rookie eligible string starters by Stuff Plus. And of course, at number 1 is Peyton Tolley. But Walbert Urena has been this great name that has popped up. Here, a Nats name was 3rd, Riley Cornelio. You know, other names that you'll recognize: Connor Prelip, Carlos Lagrange, Chase Burns still has his rookie eligibility. Blade Tidwell, Robert Gasser, for the Brewers fans in the room. And Angel Bastardo, Tanner McDougal throws 100.
Yeah,
he has good command numbers in here. Sprout, Wingquest with the Yankees, Chandler and Cade Anderson finish it up. So I just wanted to throw that at you. That's the sort of the stuff model, how it sees the spring. Cade Anderson's like a first round pick. I'm sure he's somewhere on your list.
Oh yeah.
But any commonality or any names that pop out when you look at your list that people might be surprised how high they are on the top of your list?
Yeah, I tried to flight plan a few guys. Cade Anderson I have at 13. Like he's great. I think he's crazy high floor. I also think there's some velo development to come there. I mean, he's a smaller dude, and I know he was at a big D1 program at LSU, but I think there's some. He's a guy that I think I wrote that I think he can like double pop, if that makes sense. Like he comes up and it's high floor, and then it's like as he gets like sea legs in the pros, like I can see him taking another leap. The comp that I got a ton in the draft cycle there is Max Fried. Doesn't cut the ball as much, but like similar, I'd say body mannerisms, arm angle, and also a little bit more command base. Really good at getting his 4 in on righties, which I think is important. I really like the kid Bishop Letson from the Brewers. Shout out DVR here. This dude is like, he has some of the more distinct release traits in the minors. He's up at like 7.4 extension, and he's down at 5.2 release. I think he threw in a spring game, but it was a very small sample, and his velo is also up, and he threw strikes last year. So that's the thing I think I run into a lot is like, oh, look at this stuff. And then it's like, oh yeah, he's throwing 58% strikes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not entirely sure that's going to move, but Letson had strikes. Like he was throwing, I think I had him at like 64% strikes last year. So like that guy I think is going to be a riser this year. I've seen him on some like breakout prospect lists. I'd argue he's already broken out. Like everything there from a trait standpoint is great. I think he got up to AA last year. He gets some Mizorowski comps, but Mizorowski never had command. And like this guy has command and he's throwing harder. Like he's definitely a name to like keep in the back of your mind. But all the other names, like a lot of them, I'm fascinated to see Seth Hernandez, another high schooler from California who the Pirates have done a decent job, it seems like, on the minor league side, creating guys. This guy's like one of the more highest pedigree high school arms, but I don't think we have data on him yet. So if he throws in the prospect game, we'll get that and see what his shapes look like. I'm trying to think of like other names that might pop up this year. Jack Winninger from, I think I'm saying his name right, from the Mets is an interesting one. He did throw in spring. He's got a new kind of downer curve sweeper thing. He's a weird one. I think I wrote in my piece that he is throwing this curveball that is really good because it's tagged as a sweeper, which I don't really get, but it's like -10 and -10, and it's like 84, and he doesn't really have spin capacity. So I'm wondering if the Mets like figured something out with seam effects with him, where they were able to like get him queuing on a sweeper and all of a sudden just started taking off, and they were like, great, you now have another plus curveball. Like I think that pitch is gonna be a huge game changer for him. Because he just added 3 ticks to it and he added like 5 sweep to it. And it's like, I don't know, is that possible? And he kept the depth on it. So like that one kind of breaks my brain. It's a really good pitch. I like him. He's like, I have him at 23. He's a name that, again, the Mets are going to get really loaded up. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to like pace the debut of some of their guys, but I think he could get up. McDougal's a great one too. He's got to get major league time this year. Like the White Sox have no one in that rotation. Good four-seam shape. He also had command. He's a guy, command might be tough to project, but if you look progressively from like 22 onward, he's run into some injuries, but his strike rate is like ticked up every single year, and he added some velo along the way. So I really like him. He throws like a pretty ride-run four-seam, but he throws it like, he almost like backdoors it. He had one of the highest called strike rates on his four-seamer in the minors, which I really like. So it's like a subtle thing where it's like, okay, the damage for that pitch might be if it runs back middle against righties, but his stuff's great. I think he has really good command. So yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I would say like my overall thought here is like there's a lot of names in the minors. I'm not sure if like the league's just getting better with optimization, but I struggled to like cap it at 40. I think sometimes in the past I've been like, I have 38 and I'll just throw in another 2. But this time I had like 55 names and I was like, I feel like I'm just leaving 15 off here, and all like pre-lip I left off, but like I kind of think I should have squeezed them on somewhere. I just always been a little bit concerned around like his innings totals and injuries he's run into. Hopefully that gives you some names that if you're in a dynasty league or something, you put in the back of your mind that you're trying to get ahead of things, right? If you wait for stabilization on stuff, it's probably too late in a dynasty league. So like if Lexon's still out there, he needs to be on. Like that's an absolute slam dunk for me based on the release traits and what he's doing with the ball.
Yeah, I keep hearing great things about
Yeah,
Letson, so
he's good.
I think it's time. If you got a keeper dynasty league draft or opportunity to pick him up, better do it now before he gets snatched up by someone else. Lance, before we let you go, let our listeners know where they can find your work, best place to read you, best place to follow you on social, where they can watch you.
Yeah, Substack this year is entirely behind the paywall, so I do daily pitcher notes during the regular season. I think you'll find value in it. The prospect list that I just put out in this ranking thing are two of the bigger projects I'll have this year. I'll do some draft stuff too on it as well. It's $5 a month, $30 for the year. Check that out. My YouTube channel, entirely free. Often enjoy kind of talking about similar concepts to what we dove into right here. So those are the two main places to find me. And if you're local in the Chicago market, you'll probably see me on Marquee a bit this year as well.
All right. We appreciate your time and your insight as always. Look forward to catching up with you again later this year.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Great conversation with Lance. We're going to push Trevor's deception model back 2 more weeks, actually. We're not going to do it next week. Indefinitely. April, May. We're going to get to it.
We finally
I
got
promise.
access to the tools, so we're going to get our hands deep in these.
Yeah, I think we'll have more questions with some time spent with that data. But join the Discord. The conversation continues there. You can drop mailbag questions in there for a future episode. I know a lot of people have fantasy baseball drafts coming up over this final week leading into opening day. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.